Okay.
So Sam, Black Bear, glad to be joining for another conversation about your music.
Me too. And I want to say, in between this, we had a conversation about your photography that is up on my YouTube channel, and hopefully will at some point in the near future be up on your website, as well. And I encourage everybody to go listen to that because it was really enriching for me, and I think it would be for anybody. And it would be a great way to get deeper into Vern's photography if you already know it, and to be exposed to it for the first time if you don't know it.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
I love that we're having this be a two-way conversation about our artistic processes and goals and output.
Me too.
So today we're here to talk about a specific song, a song that was written more than a decade ago, but has a tremendous amount of staying power and so much in it to talk about. So I'm really excited for this. We're going to talk about the song Black Bear, Black Bear Part 1. Is that what it's
yeah, now that there's a part 2, we can call this one Part 1. And we could talk about Part 2 later. There's a Part 2 now, but for more than a decade, there was only Black Bear. And so then, of course, it was not known as Part 1 because there was not even a concept of a Part 2 until many years later.
Perfect. Well, I think a lot of artists have put out self-titled albums named after their band or their. I feel like I'm familiar with fewer, if any, songs that are self-titled, but this song shares a title with the name of your musical project, your identity. So it seems like we should talk about those things together. Where did this song come about, and how did it come about in relation to you taking on Black Bear as a musical alias or naming your songwriting and producing project Black Bear?
Yeah, it's true. I hadn't thought about that much, how unusual that is for an artist to have a song that shares the same name as the artist name. But it's true. But I think it speaks to, the answer to the question you're asking, which is how this was all a sort of genesis moment that moved in a couple directions at once after starting from a sort of classic artistic spark moment that I can actually trace to a single moment, which is always, I think, fun. Even a lot of creative things can't be traced to a single moment, but of course it's always kind of fun and satisfying when they do. I was already interested in making music, but believe it or not, I had made very little music other than, I had done some rapping over instrumental tracks, not my own instrumental tracks, but other instrumental hip hop beats in high school, and you familiar with those things. And then in college, the only music that I made was I think 2 songs for an electronic music class that I took in my senior year. And then the following year, I have moved, or am preparing to move. I think I've already moved to Seattle from upstate New York, from where we went to college in upstate New York, Vassar. By we, I should correct, not you and me. We didn't go to the same college. We went to high school and grade school together. But the reason I say we is because I was moving from college to Seattle with 2 of my good friends from college, Scott and Andrew. And with Scott in particular, we had it in mind to start a little record label. And he was definitely already a bona fide musician. He's a great guitarist. He knew what he was doing. I had sort of semi-secret dreams of trying my hand at making music. And there was just this sort of general idea. We were obsessed with music, and there was this general idea of wanting to put out some of our own. And it was definitely it was not a guarantee that I was actually going to produce any music that was worthwhile or worth sharing. But I did already dream of it at that point. And I was on we may have spoken about this in the first conversation, but it makes sense to put it in here too. I was at my grandparents' house in New Hampshire. This is the spark moment, and was just idly looking through the North American Guide to Mammals, and landed on the page for the black bear. And it sort of arrested me because there was something interesting about it, which was that it was this black bear three times in three different colors, and it said blue phase, cinnamon phase, black phase. And so it's like blue. The first one is grayish blue, the middle one is reddish, and then the final one is black. And I don't know, it jumped out at me, and I really loved the quality of the image and the surprise and mystery of learning that black bears can be different colors at different points in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think it was in the same moment that there was this stroke of awareness that I was in the cinnamon phase of my own life. I can't say with confidence that it was like all in one moment. I saw that as an album cover. I saw the cinnamon phase as the title of the album. And mind you, I had not written this song yet.
Right.
And I hadn't written any songs yet, I don't think. So it's kind of putting the cart before the horse situation, but it worked in the end. So that's the genesis of the artist name and the album cover. And then I think shortly thereafter, I would have started writing the song Black Bear, which I think was my way of fleshing out for myself as much as anything what my connection was to this image and the idea of the bear.
I have to stop you here, Sam, because that all makes so much sense. But what about the connection to your last name? Was Black Bear being two B's and your last name being BB? Was that part of it, or did it just later? Because to me, it made so much sense also that there be this, the alliteration and just that connection. If you're going to take on a name as a musician that's not your own, that there was also this other connection to your actual name.
Yeah. That had to have been in there. I don't consciously remember thinking, oh, it's also very fitting in that regard, but I don't think it would have been long before that would have occurred to me, if not in that very first moment. Right. And that may have fed into the feeling that I had that was like, oh, this is good. This feels right. As somebody whose last name is BB, as sort of, as much as that last name makes people chuckle sometimes, of course, that means that I have an affinity for the letter B. And, the crest of the BB family crest from England is, has three B's on it. Based on my research, it's a name that comes from beekeeping. And my dad's first name was Brent. So he was Brent BB, triple B's. And certainly before I ever became Black Bear, I would have been signing letters and things. I'm sure I did to you growing up, just signing capital B, capital B. I mean, I think I did that in an email to you and some other friends yesterday. So that was in there, but I don't remember it. I don't remember it being like a big part of it, but I'm sure it's part of it.
Okay. So good. I love hearing that. So back to the fleshing out the connection that you felt to the animal, to the idea of the cinnamon phase as a middle or young part of life. And then writing the song.
As you know from listening to the song, that it's a narrative of a young person finding their way through a period of uncertainty. And I can talk more about that shortly. But just to link it first to the moment of seeing the bear and why that bear spoke to me in that way or jumped out at me. I used to say something like spirit animal, but I think that's not really politically correct to talk on those terms. So I don't call it that anymore, but it was that kind of a thing where I was feeling of identification. And but it was a little bit more complex than that. And the song, and in the song, writing the song, I think I figured that out, that some of it was a kind of yearning for something that the black bear had in my imagination, that I was struggling to find or hold on to at that point in my life.
I think that takes us right into the songwriting here and the poetry. You say it explicitly in the song that you're 22 years old. You know, you're living on the opposite coast from family, and luckily with some good friends, but away from many other relationships, trying to make your way in the sort of post-school life of relationships and making a living and having a life. And as a musician, where should we start here? Because it's not just the black bear isn't just a metaphor. It's the animal itself has such a presence in the song, but it keeps weaving back and forth with what you're experiencing, and using the black bear as a guide, or as something to aspire to, or just to really, you said, yearn for something that you could see the black bear having that isn't easy to find as a person, as a young man. Should we start with the first verse, or where do you think we should begin?
I mean, I'll respond a little bit generally to sort of set the scene before we go into the verses and specific lines. But in moving out to Seattle that year after I graduated, I was moving to the city where my then girlfriend was living. It's her hometown. And we had been together for most of college. I met her my freshman year of college. She graduated a year before me, and then moved out to Seattle and started working. And we did the long distance thing for that year. And shortly after, so part of me moving to Seattle was not only did I have this momentum with my friends to go move there, I had this very strong pull to go be in the same place as my girlfriend again. Though admittedly, I think in hindsight, I already knew that things were a little bit shaky with us. But one of the very first things that transpired within the first summer after moving there was that she ended that relationship with me. And so a lot of the earlier songs that I wrote for the Cinnamon phase were written in that first half year after that breakup from, the most significant of my relationship of my life up to that point. So, and there's other songs on the album that refer to it more explicitly. Black Bear, the song, doesn't. It refers more to a general kind of loneliness and trying to make some sort of peace with solitude, or trying to manage one's own anxieties and uncertainties, being a young person, not necessarily being able to sort of hold on to a feeling of security for very long. So that's setting the general scene. So from there we could go into some specific verses if we want.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, as I said, that the black bear, not just as a metaphor, but the animal, or at least this fantasy of the animal's life, has a really concrete presence. Like the black bear starts the song. So we're in the woods, in the mountains, and here comes black bear now crashing through the brush. It's so immediate. After the black bear has this presence, we hear that. Wouldn't it be nice to have this freedom, to have this sense of knowing your place, to have, when you're thirsty, to drink from a stream. Did you learn more about black bears in the process, or did you just let your kind of imagination of what the black bear's life could be drive?
That's a good question.
The imagery here.
In my memory, I did at least a bit of research. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't saying anything totally inaccurate about what they eat, or because I was like, coming up with lines that were that had specificity to that degree, where it's like, also stop for I'll also stop for berries, or I had to make sure, obviously everybody knows bears like honey. I had that. um, but I did some research. I did, but I think a lot of it was fueled by my imagination, and a yearning kind of imagination. And I think it's important to say that I never had an actual encounter with the black bear in the wild. And I'm sure that's something that people wonder about who listen to the song, um, whether this is sort of based on a real experience or not. But it's not. And in a way, I think maybe at times I would have felt self-conscious about that. Like somehow I was I don't know why I would feel self-conscious about that. But I think in a way it makes it just as poignant, or more so, that really it's not something that happened that I got some sort of solace or nourishment out of. It's something that I had to imagine happening to myself in order to offer solace to myself, or to help me understand the nature of my own uncertainty. Yeah.
I think there are so many things that give this song staying power, but the one that you're talking about now, I think, is one of the most resonant for me. That it's not just a song about I'm lonely and the black bear isn't, or my life is sort of confined by capitalism in an old kitchen sink while the black bear gets to live in paradise, but that the black bear does offer you, and therefore all of us, something that you are taking with you. And that line, I knew that it was lovely to have a black bear thinking of me. It doesn't feel like, oh, Sam had this experience or he didn't, and he's making it up. It feels like, here, listener, you all can have like a knowing of the black bear that can add meaning or grounding. And then that builds even further in this sort of even more metaphysical, like that's an encounter that could happen, right? You could come across a black bear on the other side of a river and have a moment of looking into each other's eyes. But then the metaphysics of it comes in even further with when he runs the fastest and spins the earth, and that this sort of what feels like a an age-old legend that what spins the earth is the black bear running, and that turns the earth around to show us the sun. So I think it's my listening to it. It's not. It's for you, but it's for all of us, right? That the sort of the black bear's power provides something.
Yeah, I think it was an act of triangulation where I was projecting I was trying to use the idea of the black bear as a way to give myself some wise advice.
Yeah.
Because it's the all of it is generated by me, even the experience of the moment, and not to make it like it's not, I'm not saying, well, that the brilliance is all mine, but it is, it's all, the whole thing is concocted by me, which means that whatever flashes of wisdom are in there that I'm offering to the version of myself that's the narrator of the song, is also coming from me, and in that way it was also an act of self-empowerment. I've never really thought about it explicitly on those terms until just now. But I think maybe that's one of the unique things about it, is that it has this blend of a bit of, sort of what you might call typical young person solipsism and uncertainty, mixed with a sort of comforting collection of ways to work against some of those feelings, or a sort of deeper wisdoms that can counteract some of those feelings.
Yeah, well said. I mean, and I think that so much good, I hesitate to say great, but I think there's moments of greatness in this songwriting. So much good songwriting seems to have some element of reaching outside of yourself and outside of one's own anxieties about your own struggles, and seeing a bigger picture, or a hope that may not be something that one can live every moment or know all the time, but can kind of reach for or know is out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of like young Springsteen or something, like
Mm-hmm.
a powerful chorus in a song that's like, there's hope, we're holding on, we're there, we got this message that I think so many of us wish we could, exist in that space all the time. But if a song can remind us of it, and somebody has to write those songs, and you did that here for yourself. So I think it's fitting to call it, a wisdom that you're trying to offer to yourself and therefore to the listener.
Yeah, it's like trying to honor the suffering while taking something that you've learned, or that it's made visible to you by having gone through the suffering, and then paying that forward in some way. I think a lot of the most beloved and stuff that lasts and that really just sort of stays with people for repeated listenings, and this song certainly is, by far and away, that this song is the one song of mine that has stayed in a much more substantial way for a much longer period of time than any of my other songs. And I've thought, there's part of me that just understands it instinctually. And then there's another part of me that every couple of years is like, what is it? Like, what is the magic thing about this song that makes people go a little bit cuckoo for it? There's a number of people with lyrics from this song tattooed onto their body out there in the world. There's, and I'm not saying this again to be braggadocious or anything, but it's if anything, I marvel over it, and I am deeply honored that there are as many people that have been touched by this song in a really important way, and a lot of people have reached out to tell me that over the years in various ways, and it speaks. I've gotten a lot of people telling me that it got them through a particularly difficult period in their lives. And a lot of times when people get specific, it's like we're talking difficult periods that were much more difficult than the period that I was going through when I wrote this. Mm-hmm. Because in reality, it was on paper, my life was really cool. And, you came to visit us. It was a cool situation out there, but there is still something when you're going through heartache and uncertainty, that even when you're living in a cool house in a cool city, and it's the first time you're really out on your own, and we had the kind of house where there was people over all the time, and there was music happening.
Yeah, you guys were starting a record label. I mean, it was cool.
It was cool, and it was not lost on me that it was cool. I had tons of fun and I enjoyed it a lot. But that can still coexist with some sort of internal life that one is living, that is sort of missing something else, and can still be in a room full of people and have something in the back that it feels like something is missing. And I think Black Bear really speaks to that. It's not a breakup song directly. It's more just a song about feeling like something is missing and something hasn't been figured out yet. And you don't feel fully fulfilled by the life you're living, but you can sense that it's there. And if you look, if you look in the right direction, you might find a kind of role model in the form of, in this case, an animal. Um, but just to take it back there to some of the people who've reached out to me to tell me how important this song was to them in a really difficult time. Um, it's just beyond gratifying from the artist's point of view to know that something that you made was able to serve as some sort of emotional raft for somebody through a particularly tough time. And that's, it's really it's the highest compliment, the highest honor to my mind.
That's beautifully said. I think we'll come back to the song and the meaning that it has, but since we've just told a story about you being a novice musician, somebody who had written poetry and written lyrics, and was trying your hand at this kind of songwriting for basically the first time, you had these ideas, but how did you turn it into a song? You could talk about production, you could talk about melody. Like, what were the moments where it came together as something with chords and harmonies and rhythm?
Yeah, I went back and revisited the tracks to in preparation, and was thinking about, okay, what's this? What's that? I was taking it apart. It hasn't been super long since I've done that, because I did a remaster of it when I released Black Bear Part 2. I was able to find it on an old hard drive, and I hadn't opened that file in over a decade. And I mean, really, I had hardly opened any GarageBand files in over a decade. Now I opened it in Logic. I've gone up one step to to Logic Pro, which is basically GarageBand Plus. And so it opened right up, much to my amazement. And it was crazy to just see it all there and to recognize the audio files, and to be like, oh yeah, that's what the song looks like in audio file format. I worked with it so much that is familiar to me, that like the bass line looks like this and the drum beat looks like that. And so I am able to identify every single piece of the song. One thing that I should say to a listener here that's maybe unusual for a musician, is that I've basically hardly have ever played any of my music live. And so there's no extended experience of knowing the parts of the songs by way of having to play them with a band on a stage or having to play them live myself or anything like that. So it is sort of like opening an old time capsule for me when I look back on the file and remind myself how the song was actually built. And that is really how I made music back then. That's the way that a novice builds music or makes songs, is by building them piece by piece, and if you're able to gather up the more simple pieces you gather, because it has to be simple, because I'm not trained in anything really. I just have my ear and my own sensitivity. And really, I think I would say the only thing about the only thing about this song that has a level of sophistication and expertise that goes beyond novice is the lyrics. And that's based on being a writer for my whole life and having written lyrics before. But so this song was one of the first few songs that I ever made, which is also a trip. And it's weird. It's weird, I think, how many artists, or it's weird's not the right word. It's just fascinating how many artists have that experience where one of the first songs they ever wrote that really took off is one of the ones that means the most to their fans, or that has the longest staying power. I recently listened to an interview with MGMT in which they're talking about the song Kids. And it was one of the first songs they ever wrote as well in college. You went to college with them.
Yeah, I
You know
knew that. I
that.
knew them. I knew
You
them
saw
in
them playing
college, and
that. Yeah.
that MP3 was getting passed around, emailed around Wesleyan students before it was
Yeah.
playing over the speakers in every Urban Outfitters and everything. And we were like, wow, our friends made this song. This is a banger. But it really was. They had just made that. They had just decided to team up and be a band. It was brand new.
Yeah. It was crazy. I knew that already from you and then from other things I've read or interviews I've watched or something. And I also know that they have at various times have mixed relationship to that fact, and that that Kids actually was sort of almost a joke song for them. That it was them trying to make a pop song when really they sort of loathed that kind of pop at that point. Anyway, that's a tangent that we don't need to go down, but it's a recent example of, of some sort of magic happening in like very early, if not even almost first creations. I think particularly with music, that there's something in there that is, it's you can feel the urgency of the first time, of the like, and I think probably the vulnerability. I mean, maybe you can speak to this too as a listener. I'm going into this song with basically zero experience. I'm teaching myself to use the machinery at my disposal, which is, I'll get a little bit technical now. At this point, I have a Boss Dr. Groove drum machine, the DR202, which I actually have in my hand right now. I brought it over from the States here to Germany, where I live now. I haven't put it to use, but I did recently, in going through all the beats that are on here, I found the Black Bear beat here still on this device. This is a piece of hardware. And that's where the drum beat is from. And I believe the bass line may have been, that's the one thing I was not totally certain about. The bass line could be from the drum machine, or it could be from this upright organ that I got at the Salvation Army in South Seattle for, if my memory serves me correctly, it was $12.99. But so this one of these classic old upright organs that has 2 layers of keys. It has a couple of preset drum beats, like polka, waltz, rock and roll, blues, R&B, and some settings where when you press one key, it plays a whole chord. And the foundation to the song Black Bear is, I think it's I think it's basically 4 notes repeated, me playing that chord function on that organ, which when you think about it is sort of that's the novice trying to make a song, right? It's like, I can't even play full chords yet, or if I could, or if I would have, it would have been even messier,
Right.
And then I worked up from there. I think probably that was the first thing that came, and then maybe the drum beat, and then there's this weird sound, this like that's from another keyboard that I had. I believe that was added a bit later in the process. It's either from my microKORG, which I would have gotten a little bit later, or it's from this like just sort of relatively cheap Casio keyboard that I had on some sort of horn setting. And then of course there's the humming that goes into the chorus. Mm-hmm. And I would have been borrowing Scott's microphone, which I just would have been holding in my hand. It's an SM. It was a Shure SM58, which is like the classic microphone with a ball microphone on the top that you would see at a concert. And then I ran my vocals through his overdrive pedal. So like it's a pedal meant for guitars, really. But because I was insecure about how my voice sounded and the quality of my recording was not clean at all. I was just in my bedroom and I didn't know what I was doing. I discovered at some point that I could send the vocals through this pedal and adjust the overdrive as much as I wanted to get distortion on my vocals. And that was a big discovery. That was a thing that really helped me enter into it without getting overly self-conscious about not sounding perfect. And then the second magical thing that happened, which I still do on pretty much everything that I make, was vocal doubling. And it's this thing that I think a lot of musicians, probably early ones, like more amateur ones, experience for the first time, the magical quality of singing with yourself, doubling your voice on another track, maybe tripling, maybe quadrupling, maybe harmonizing. And then it's a way of making the thing feel bigger than just a person alone in their room. It's also a way of hiding imperfections, which I don't feel ashamed about. I don't mind imperfect music at all. But when you think of a sort of group of people singing along rowdily to something, or, it's those things don't matter. It's about something else. So those are the ingredients of the song, and other than that, it just sort of took me being audacious enough to be like, I'm going to sit down and try to do this, because I can.
Do you have an early memory of knowing that it was working? Did you play it for somebody first, or a version of it? And did you just know? Did you surprise yourself?
I think I surprised myself.
You put together.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I really wish that I had a specific memory. But I do remember the feeling of having really surprised myself, which is such a cool feeling, and any artist knows some version of that feeling. And I know that Scott was responding to it very positively right away. I'm sure Andrew would have as well, the other friend that we were living with at the time. Beyond that, I don't have specific memories of sharing it like really early on. But it wasn't long before people who heard it in the sort of extended friend circle. It actually, we released it first along with I Believe in Immediacy and another one of my instrumental songs called When We Can Teleport, Where Will You Go? On a compilation, which was the first release that our label, which was called Baskerville Hill. Our first release was a compilation of stuff that us and our friends had made. And it had those 3 songs of mine on it. It had, I think, 3 songs of Scott's on it, and then some other tracks from other friends in our musician circle out there in Seattle, and a couple who were friend connections from college and based in New York. But so that was the first release of Black Bear, and I believe it's track number 1 on that compilation. And I do remember people responding to it positively and strongly, pretty quickly.
We were all listening to CDs back then, primarily. Was that the way that people were hearing it, getting the CD that you pressed for that compilation? And
I just knocked over my water bottle.
That didn't sound like a water bottle.
It didn't. What did it sound like?
It sounded like a little drum machine beat, like a little ba-doom.
I'm gonna sample that. I've been doing a lot more found sound sampling on my new music, so it's good.
Yeah, good.
It's not too disastrous. It's just a bit of water on an old carpet being mopped up by Kleenex. All right, let's try that question again.
Yeah, I think I was.
CDs.
Yeah, you made some CDs of that compilation and sharing them. There was no Spotify back then.
Not even close. Yeah.
How were people hearing it?
Well, actually, I joke not even close, but it was MySpace. MySpace was the first. That's where most people would have heard it. A select few would have heard it on, buying the CD and hearing it there. People who were in our circle who might have come to some of our early shows. We did play some shows. I did play a few live shows back then. They were all essentially, for the most part, me singing over instrumentals of the tracks that I'd made. I'm not a traditional instrumentalist that can play and sing at the same time in front of people. I'm sure if I practiced a whole lot, I might be able to get there. But yeah, so if a few people would have heard it there, but I put it up on my MySpace. I'm sure as soon as I felt like I was ready, because MySpace was the new frontier, and really I can't stress enough how important that factor, along with the GarageBand factor, was for this whole thing coming into fruition at all at the time that it did, because that really was the new frontier. Anybody who had an Apple computer, it came with GarageBand, and GarageBand is, it has a very friendly user interface that does not take long to get the basics of. That was a way of welcoming people who either didn't have the economic means to think about getting recording equipment or a tape machine, or learning how to teach oneself how to record onto a 4-track or anything like that. Or somebody doesn't have the space or whatever, and your computer has a microphone built into it. So you don't even, to make something like a demo, you didn't even need to have more than your computer and the GarageBand, which came on it, and that mixed with MySpace, I think, created a huge wave of DIY bedroom produced music, which has evolved into something so it's so huge by now that the biggest record of last year was produced in a bedroom on Logic Pro, Billie Eilish, or the year, let's see, I think her first full length they made in their childhood house in Phineas's bedroom, with her sitting on the bed holding the microphone, and it won, like, I don't remember how many Grammys, and so it's kind of wild to be able to trace back to this moment when suddenly all of that was even dreamable for somebody to make worthwhile music that lots of people could hear in their own bedroom and then distribute it without any middle person at all, basically. And for it to catch. And it didn't, this song didn't catch big on MySpace, but people heard it. It was a time when people were cruising around on MySpace looking for new music, especially people who were interested in music like this, that was lo-fi, that you wouldn't have found anywhere else, that wouldn't have been on the radio, or music that was from your own community. And that's how I ended up meeting my next girlfriend that I met that first year in Seattle, Jamie. She was making music in the same way in her own bedroom on GarageBand with a guitar, just singing into her computer. And we found each other that way, and then there's a number of songs on the Cinnamon phase that are about her or inspired by her. And she's definitely, I was just looking through the liner notes earlier today, and, she's in there, and it speaks to a whole specific time, which was, I think, the dawn of a new era, which I think some people might think of as gone by at this point, but I think it's only evolved and evolved and evolved. And I think there's there's tons of music that you listen to, in tons of music that's even on the radio at this point, that was made in somebody's bedroom or somebody's basement studio, you know. And this is when that all started.
Yeah. And that's interesting to hear about, partly in relation to this song having some explicit references to that time period. Not so much, you know, about being 22, it's a new century, the sort of the pressure of, maybe a pressure that most people feel when they move out on their own for the first time. But I also think that, like, you know, the other side of that, you know, globalization, the pace of capitalism ramping up, you know, the sort of pressures of the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But that there's that artistic possibility is also specific to that time, is a nice kind of counterbalance.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a reaction in a way.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, I didn't think of myself as particularly political back then, and you know, I was too concerned with the politics of my own world. I think my own little world, but yeah, it did feel like a sort of like, you know, we wanted to feel like punks in a way. We weren't really punks, but we wanted to feel like we were starting a little thing that we were going to be able to control ourselves, and that we weren't going to have to worry about gatekeepers to know that our music would be heard by at least somebody.
Yeah,
you know. And eventually, the Black Bear did get played on KEXP a little bit in its first year, which is the big radio station out of Seattle. It was definitely not like on their, it was not on their rotation or their, you know, their normal playlist. But I think there were some of the, you know, not the main time, big time DJs on the big slots, but I think it was getting played on some of the off hour slots occasionally, because I would hear sometimes people being like, I heard this song on the radio. And I never had the pleasure of hearing that song on the radio. Yeah. I have one really wild story. The only place that I have ever heard this song out there in the world. And I still can't believe that it happened. And part of me wonders if I could have been mishearing. I'm sure I told you this story, but the apartment that we lived in Brooklyn for 10 years plus in Greenpoint, there were probably about 12 units in the building. We lived on the third floor, and is it the third floor? Yeah, third floor. And one day, we're friends with a couple of people in the building, but not that many. And I'm walking by one of the apartments, the studio apartment that's right next to the front door. And I definitely do not know the person who lives there. I know I have seen him. I can see in my mind, I have said hello to the person who lives in there, but I've never spoken to him beyond that. And I'm like on my way out to work, and I hear like the last 10 seconds of Black Bear, like playing loud from his apartment. And I regret it to this day, not doing anything.
Right.
I was too stunned, I think, and I think I doubted myself. But I think part of me knew it was unmistakable to me. You know, it was the sort of the humming outro, and I went out, you know, to unlock my bike and go to work. I think I might have been in a hurry, which would have added to my excuse for why I didn't knock on the door and say, "That's my fucking song you're listening to. I live upstairs." You know, like, but it still made me happy, and yeah, that's the only experience I've had of hearing it. I've definitely had a couple other moments where I've run into somebody who, you know, who was like a friend of a friend who didn't know that was me, and then would become friends. And then when it comes out, like, "Oh, you made music? What do you make music?" And I'm like, "Oh, my artist name was Black Bear." And then someone would be like, "You're Black Bear?" I've had that happen, I think, twice, where I have gotten to know somebody reasonably well, or like I'm talking over dinner with an acquaintance, and that has happened a couple times, which is, I'll admit, is someone who is, who doesn't, who doesn't have that experience more than twice. It's pretty fucking fun when it happens.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever heard this song out in the world, but my one sort of similar story about this song is maybe the one time I've ever had a semi-celebrity in my home. A friend of mine was dating an actor who was, I won't say the person's name, but somebody who had a big name part on a major ongoing HBO drama that was a cult classic, and the person was sort of definitely an ascendant artist, actor in the world, and was starting his own clothing company. Was over at our place for brunch, and I had this song on a mix that we were listening to during brunch, and I don't think anybody had noticed the music that was playing. We were eating and talking, and then this song came on, and this actor stopped me and said, "Oh, what is this? What are we listening to?" And I said, "Oh, this is Blackberry. He's actually a friend of mine." And it was immediately like, "Oh, you know this artist? This is great. I got a link with this guy. We should do something together. Maybe he can do something with my brand." He didn't follow up. I mean, I think when you're busy and starting your own brand, those kinds of ideas. But that was one experience of the pull of this song, and the potential to really draw people in.
That's
sorry he never
cool,
contacted you and got you making music for his.
Yeah, that would have been my break. But yeah, it's, I mean, I love the stories, when people get in touch with me. Usually it's via Facebook. That's sort of the easiest way that people find me, or sometimes people direct message me on Instagram now that I have a BlackBerry Instagram. And I love those origin stories of, more often than not, it's like Spotify discovery fed me this song, and I love it and I can't stop listening to it. Or like, this song was crucial for me and my friends back in 2000 whatever. And it's not always 2006, 2007 when it came out. It's I think, thanks to Spotify algorithms and its own word of mouth power, it could be 2014, it could be 2010. That's another thing that I find really sort of wonderfully mysterious about it, that like, despite feeling time stamped in a way, I mean, and maybe that's just more something that I feel because it's a very time stamped song for me, that it transcends its moment. And and I've even had people tell me, like, years after that it was made, being like, this was so ahead, like, you made this in 2006, it's so ahead of its time, which I never would have thought myself at that moment. It felt very much of its time to me. But then I think younger people who discover it now later, who know it, who are hearing it in an entirely different context of listening, and maybe next to different, not listening to it next to a whole bunch of other DIY indie rock from 2005, 6, 7. But listening to it in the context of the now, I'm always sort of amazed and very pleasantly surprised that it still holds up in that way, and that it doesn't feel time stamped either in terms of the style or in terms of the production value, which is relatively low, or that it's, the production value is so secondary to whatever the other power of the song is, that it doesn't really much matter to the people who it speaks to. But the way that it has legs continues to surprise and delight me.
I love hearing that, and I think that there's the sound of it, and its ability to feel contemporary, not just 20 years ago, but today. Mm-hmm. And then there's the themes and the sort of the existential questions of one's own young life, and mm-hmm. I think looking to the natural world for meaning and answers is only more pressing, as the crisis of our environment has come into clearer focus, and young people are trying to find answers to, how can I keep on, and how can the world keep on, and the poetry here. I'm not surprised that say young people or 20 somethings now are hearing it and feeling like there's something for them.
That aspect of it, which maybe we haven't spoken about enough yet, I'm glad you bring that up, because there's a couple of key demographics. At risk of sort of oversimplifying the groups of people, if I can recognize patterns in the groups of people that seem to be really touched by the song, they're the two main groups that I have identified as being an actual pattern. And there's overlap between them, or there can be, is young people who are going through a tough time, or who have gone through a tough time, and this song found them in that tough time, sort of when it could really reach out to touch them. And then people who experience it in a natural environment, in a natural experience. I get that a lot too. People being like, I first heard this song on a hiking trip through the Cascades, and it just cut right into me. And there's a lot of that. Or there's people who have actually had experiences with black bears in the wild who have told me about that. And a lot of people who tell me stories about being out in the woods with this song as a companion. So that is an element of it as well. And of course, there's areas where those two groups will overlap. I mean, every young person goes through some kind of suffering at some point. So of course there's overlap.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Vern.
For sharing all this. It's fantastic to hear, after hearing the song so many times, some of the details that I never knew about.
Well, cool. I hope that for anybody who takes the time to listen, that it's interesting and maybe eye-opening and just fun to have some context. And to anybody who's listening, the deepest gratitude ongoing for listening to the extent that you have to my music, and for getting as far as listening to this conversation all the way to the end. I thank you from the deepest parts of me to the deepest parts of you for listening, for caring, and for wanting to get into it.